Good morning. I wanted to come live today to talk about our topic of the week. And our topic of the week this week is overcoming fear. We might be fearful of our purpose or stepping into our purpose. So then we allow sometimes confusion to kind of be that excuse that we give. Like, oh, I'm not really sure what he wants me to do, so I'm not going to do anything. Right? Or we maybe are fearful of asking for funds, right? To get our nonprofit started or to get our personal support going so we can focus solely on the nonprofit. I just had a client this week, and this is something in my own life too, many years ago, where that I just struggled. It was like, no, I can work harder and longer. I don't need this. I don't need other people to support me. But if that's what God is calling, why am I standing in the way of that? And it was tears. It was really, really difficult to move forward in that and ask for what I needed to do. Well, really what God was calling me to ask for. And then allow people to come alongside to do that. And it took a lot of personal, seeking, that idea of really realizing that that's pride. It's not about, working harder and longer. That's pride. God calls us to a certain level of work, and work is good, but at the same time, rest is important as well. And he calls us to different things at different times. And then I think about, as I moved on in my nonprofit journey, and maybe this is where you're at, where I needed to let go of some fundraisers that were really, really doing super well. And they were like our bread and butter, right? Like they were the ones that were supporting all our trips back and forth to Kenya. I think of specifically the rummage sale. We had a rummage sale and it was a massive thing. I mean, we were making like $15,000, and that was our biggest amount of money coming in. I was still working full time at the time. So we had no personal support. It was just a matter of the travel back and forth. And it was just an amazing fundraiser. And he was calling us to close it down. And I was like, no, that is our only money. I can't close that down. There's no way we can do that. And through the years, it was and I don't even know how long it took. When I heard that, I would like to say it was that year that I closed it down, but I don't know if that was the case. It might have been a year or two, because I might not have been listening closely, because it was it was so successful. Why would I close something down that's successful? And that idea of because he tells you to, because he has something behind that that's even more successful. But you don't have time to do both. You've got to make choices in that, especially as you're a startup nonprofit. You don't have a big staff, even volunteers. You have very few volunteers. You don't have a lot of finances. And so we need to be willing to do what he's calling us to do. So we need to be in prayer. We need to be journaling. And then we need to take those bold steps. Right? We need to ask. We need to ask him. He talks in Matthew 7, left, right, and sideways about we don't have because we don't ask. And it's in other places other than Matthew. And it's in other places in Matthew. And we need to be asking for what we need and where he wants us to go. And then we need to be willing to follow his direction. I was just listening to someone this morning on the TV, and they were talking about that suffering and trials and struggles are really a way of getting rid of ourselves and trusting him more. A lot of times we have those struggles because we're putting ourselves first. We're putting what we want or what we think something should look like first, instead of saying, okay, God, this is what I need. This is where I feel you're leading me. This is what I need. Or if I'm not sure even of that step yet, then I ask him, what do you want me to be doing? Give me the courage to do that. Give me the willingness to do whatever that takes. Or if I'm at that next stage where I need to reach out for personal support, or I need to reach out for support for the first time, that idea of tell me how to do that. Give me the courage to do that. Remove any character things in me that are stopping me from doing that, or doing it well, or doing it at all, because that's a big thing with nonprofits, that we feel like, oh, we're not going to take any money from it. But if we are fully devoting our lives to this, we need to support our families. We need to support, our lives as well. And he wants to take care of us that way as well. And if we're further along on the journey and we're in the nonprofit journey, but we're not willing to let go of maybe a fundraiser that's been just a bread and butter, but he's calling us out of it, Or we're not sure if he is, so we're not willing to even address it because it's like, no, 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 I can't do that because that is our source. Like that is, and it's like, no, that is not your source. He is your source. Those fundraisers, those other things are just your resource. They are not your source. He is your source. And that's where the struggles come in. That's where the emotional stuff comes in. That's where all of those other, the idea of confusion on what my purpose is, the idea of confusion on whether or not I should let go of this. That's the devil coming in there and trying to create what God said, but maybe didn't write it down, or you're just scared to take that jump. We got to be really clear about that. We've got to get that written down, and we've got to take immediate steps to start doing what he's calling us to do. So we're going to be talking about that this week. I'm excited to get you some more information on that and some Bible verses. We talked about Matthew 7 is a great chapter to be studying, but just the courage to overcome the ask. In our course, we have a whole module with a lot of different ways of overcoming the ask. But this week, we want to really just kind of dig deep on just a couple little points so we can get moving. And that might be in our purpose, or it might be in, the initial fundraising, or it might be you're further along on that fundraising journey. Like me, I'm kind of at that point where we're doing a bigger event and I'm just like, I just don't know how to go about doing that. And just feeling a little out of my elements, right? Out of routine, out of those things, but yet pushing through anyway. And so I'm right there with you in this journey. This is not something that we ever overcome because he's always going to be leading us into deeper things. Why? Because it increases our dependence on him. So it's never one and done. It is a constant progress, not perfection, with him. So be encouraged, but whatever that next step is with him today, can you pray and ask him for the courage to take that? If it's to start pursuing your purpose, if it's to, make that ask for personal support, if it's to, jump into that new, bigger fundraiser, or let go of something, maybe, because that was one of the things when we were doing this, like I needed to let go of that fundraiser and we didn't know what it was going into. Like he didn't give us that revelation. And so we were letting go of something before having that thing to replace it. And that was really nerve-wracking. It was like, yeah, I'll let go of it once you tell me what you want me to do next. And again, that's relying on the resources of a fundraiser, right? Versus the source, him, to provide all that we need for our personal families as well as our nonprofits. So again, be watching for later this week for more details on that as far as Bible verses, as far as specific ways to go about doing that. Today's big takeaway, journal. Journal, 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 journal. Journal, I don't like journaling myself, but I will tell you every time I do it, I get everything that I need. He promises that in Jeremiah 33:3 and very many other places. I talked about Matthew today as well, Matthew 7, the idea of asking. If we don't ask him, how will we know? When we ask him, he will reveal it. When we ask him with our whole heart. It's not, most of my heart, but I'm not doing that. Right? It's our whole heart. We're willing to do whatever he asks us to do. Not because we think it's a good idea. In fact, most of the time, it's going to feel like it's not a good idea. Like, that's not the way the world would say to do this. That's not the way, this, that, or the other. But his ways are higher than our ways. His ways are different than our ways. And I can tell you from experience, there has been some crazy ways that he has asked us to raise money and to trust him. One way that comes to mind was our initial fundraising that we did. And it was a long story as far as how we got there, but I was way overwhelmed, thought for sure there was no way I would ever be able to raise that. It was somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000, depending on which house we were going to buy in Kenya, a building really, not necessarily a house, but a building we were going to buy. And there was one thing I was sure of, there was no way I was going to be able to raise that much money. I was sure of. This was back early on in the journey. And I was anxious. I was overwhelmed. I was freaking out. I was in Kenya alone at the time, had spent the day with my Kenyan friends there at the time. And we were looking at these buildings, came back to an empty house, came back to just solo. Everything was solo that trip, and just going crazy in my head. Like, there's just no way. I don't know how I'd ever do this. There's no way I can do this. I know I cannot. Like, this is not going to happen. Like, just spinning. Can you relate to that anxiety? I had to get out of the house, so I left the house and I went out to the beach We're right on the Indian Ocean where we work in Kenya, so went down to the beach. And as I was down at the beach, there was just this moment. The waves were coming in, the waves were going out. My head is still spinning. And after a minute, down there just in the heat and in the waves and in the calming of just the water being near, there was just this thought in my head of, if he can handle the water and he can control all the oceans of the world and keep them in place day and night for however many years old this earth is, you don't think he can raise $50,000 or $70,000? I didn't walk away having any answers. I had no idea what this would look like, and I still didn't believe in my ability to do it, but I knew he could. And so the anxiety, though, did not go away fully, but it was kind of down at a level where it was like, okay, I can go make dinner. I can go do what I need to do, do what I needed to do. So I came home from that trip to the ocean, and I was grabbing my laptop. I don't know what I was probably doing, a blog post on what happened that day. In fact, yeah, it was that, because I remember typing it. And but my cord got stuck in some bags that were on the floor. Some person had asked me to grab some bags from a store there, actually from a mission that does these bags, and she was going to sell them to pay for her next trip to Kenya. And so I had gone to that store and grabbed those bags, and they were laying there. And as I'm pulling the cord, they were all messed up in there. And as I was pulling the cord out, there was just this word in my head, and it said crafts. And I was like, you think that selling crafts is going to get us $60,000? Like, have you been to a craft fair lately? Like, we're talking $1, $2, $3, maybe $5 on high-end items at a craft fair. Like, they just don't go for a lot. And I was like, yeah, this is never going to work. But I went and grabbed some bags of my own personal money that I had left, went to that store, grabbed some of my own bags, and then went in, did some craft fairs, made some money, not $50,000 overnight, but over the time, I bet you we've raised probably that or more, because after that, we opened an Etsy store, we did a lot more craft fairs, we added food to them, we had a big events with our run walk, like there was just a lot of things that it led into, but it started with that crazy like crafts. Like, there's no way. There was no way. But was I willing to do what he told me to do, even though really in my eyes, there was no way that was going to bring what we needed? And the reality is it didn't bring it fast enough for those properties. We ended up not doing those properties, and that wasn't what he was calling me to. He was calling me to something different. That was a whole nother project that we were focused on, adoption on that project. And so he uses money sometimes as a way to lead and guide us. But really it comes down to our dependence. Are we dependent on him? Or are we dependent on our own selves? Like, I'll think up a good plan because I spent many years in that. Let me just think up another better fundraiser. I'll just do, 12 a year, and we'll just keep, like that whole grind, right? And it's like, that doesn't work. It produced some results, but it wasn't peaceful. It wasn't good for my health. It wasn't good for my family. It wasn't good for the mission as a whole because I was so busy. I wasn't thinking about the mission as a whole. I was just out there grinding, trying to find money, trying to dig for money and, just do whatever it took to make that money as opposed to asking him. So let's get over that fear. And it might be in another area of your life, whatever area that is. Just let's get over that fear and let's take that to him. Get in the Word. Get in the Word. I got my Bible over here. Get in the Word and get journaling and ask him. What is it you need? Ask him. He will reveal it when we seek him with our whole heart and we do what he says, even if it appears to be a little bit crazy. All right. We'll talk to you guys later in the week. I hope you have an awesome rest of your Tuesday.